Hi, I'm Rajnish.
And I'm Bridget,
Welcome to TerreScience.
the podcast where reality matters.
It's a great pleasure to have Dr. Phil Taylor here with me. Phil is an old friend. I've known him for at least a decade, if not more. And Phil is the Director of Innovation and Outreach at Crop Science's Bayer. And Phil is a trained cell biologist from John Innes University. And he also was a Bayer Science Fellow in 2020, which is about 2 years ago. So it's wonderful to have you on here, Phil. And as you know, I've been tracking your progress. You were with Monsanto, then you are with Bayer, and you're doing some wonderful work with startups and just bringing new technology into the AgTech space. So we also have Dr. Krolikowski with us, and she is a professor at Contra Costa Community College, and she runs a wonderful biotechnology program there. We've had other podcasts with her before. You can check them out. And it's just great to have her here because her students are involved with biotechnology and they work along with us in several projects. So to get started, Phil, would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you got to Monsanto and Bayer? And then maybe Dr. Kolikowski can also tell us.
Sure. Thanks, Rajnish, and great to spend some time chatting with you this afternoon. We have known each other almost 2 decades, right? because
yes. Oh,
because,
that's right.
because I joined Monsanto right about the time that you joined Mendel. It was about 17 or so
That's
years
right.
ago, and
That's
I got there after a brief time in academia. As you said, I got my PhD from the John Innes, did a couple of postdocs. Moved to the States in 2004 from my native UK. My wife is American, so when we got married, we decided I would jump the pond, not her. But after a couple of years here in the States, I realized, it was going to take a long time to build an academic career in a new country. Was kind of starting from zero after we moved, and sort of ended up joining Monsanto in about 2006. Actually, originally as a regulatory scientist. I started out in our regulatory group. That was a very cool way, very quickly, to touch all kinds of different projects and all kinds of different aspects of the later stage product development. But at that time, there was a lot of work going on in our biotech program around new traits and new opportunities for improving crop productivity for our pharma customers. And so I quickly kind of jumped into that more discovery mode, which is where Rajnish and I first worked together. And what's cool about that, Rajnish, thinking about it in conversation with you, almost everything I did from that point out had some aspect of a partnership with another company, an academic, some kind of third party outside of our internal R&D organization. Because whether it was as Monsanto or now Bayer, everything we did had a sort of a collaboration and partnership mentality and approach to it. We knew we couldn't solve all the problems we were trying to solve by ourselves, and so we're always very what's the word, sort of leaned into the idea of partnerships and collaborations as a key part of our strategy. And in a way, that's been the thread that's kind of woven through my career through its entire time. A few years at the bench as a molecular cell biologist, sort of being part of those projects that we worked on together in many cases in the early days of sort of yield and trying to develop traits around drought or nitrogen use or intrinsic yield. But later, actually about 10 years ago, I actually had the opportunity to jump into the team that managed those partnerships and actually sort of led those relationships with whether it's startups, academics, other corporates, to build R&D partnerships and do R&D together. And so have been in that space now for about 10 years with a number of different hats. I was a partnership manager, collaboration manager in the team, managing a portfolio of R&D partnerships. I later had the chance to come back to that group and lead it and lead all of our external interactions for plant biotech into the integration with Bayer. So was responsible for everything from competitive intelligence to prospecting to deal flow to collaboration management. But then since the acquisition of Bayer that closed now just over 4 years ago, have had a role in this sort of broader innovation space, and have been using my time and working with across my team to really think about what's next when it comes to partnering. What are new ways to build partnerships? What are new approaches and technologies that we need to think about as agriculture evolves? Because I don't need to tell either of you, agriculture is changing at an unbelievable rate, and we have to, change even more in the next 10 or 20 years than we have in the last 50, just to feed a growing planet, and make sure we do it. And this is actually one of the things I love about where we're at with Bayer right now is to look at it both through the lens of productivity and production, but also through sustainability in the environment, and making sure that we're producing more, but doing it in a responsible and appropriate way, and creating solutions around that for our customers. So today, as you said, I lead our open innovation and outreach team, which I like to think of as being sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to partnering and external sort of collaborations and interactions with third parties, thinking about new ways to engage, new topics to engage in, getting into spaces that we as Bayer have not necessarily been as active in, or may not have as much credibility for partnering around, and finding new ways to sort of reach out and build innovation ecosystems around the world. So thrilled for the chance to talk about it. Thanks.
No, that's great, wonderful. And I think Bayer is more than anyone else on the planet is most poised to take a lead in all the changes that need to happen. And with you at the helm, I feel much better to develop these relationships, because we were talking before. I remember 2 decades ago, I was really impressed with how you managed relationships even back then. So that was a great experience working with you. So now moving to Dr. Krolikowski. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Phil, when you were speaking about shifting from academia to, an industrial space, it got me reflecting about the biggest thing that I noticed when I moved from being a postdoc to then working at Mendel Biotechnology. And it wasn't that the science was any worse or any less interesting than in academics, but the difference that I saw was that you could think bigger. Often in an academic lab, the resources are actually kind of small. You only have a couple of people at most working on any one problem. I was just so excited to be able to do genetics experiments that thought big, to do DNA extraction experiments that thought big. And it really opened my eyes to the power of working in industry when there's actually a product that people will want at the end of the tunnel, as opposed to a really fascinating new discovery that maybe only a couple people want. And so that leads me, I loved working there, but really my favorite thing was working in teams of people to get the work done. And so it was a natural transition when I moved to my teaching career here at Contra Costa College. I brought all that love of science, all that excitement about doing science really well, but I've always had a passion to help more people understand science, to communicate it myself, and to help more folks feel a part of the scientific endeavor. And in an academic setting, there weren't as many people working with me, but in an industrial setting, there are people from all different walks of life, people from all different backgrounds working together to move our products forward and to do really great science. So here at Contra Costa College, as you were speaking, Phil, you talked about improving production of food so that nobody goes hungry, and keep being sustainable, right? About not poisoning the planet in order to feed our own human selves. And it strikes me that the students at my college, Contra Costa College, really many do suffer food insecurity. And so the idea of getting enough to eat and having it be at an affordable price is a huge thing that either my students directly or people they know well are constantly wrestling with. But they know the solution isn't to just, plow over through the forests and just make food for humans. They know that we've got to keep our planet surviving. And so I think the challenge of providing food is an exciting one that a lot of people really don't have opportunity to think about, except in their own family life. But thinking big, having this opportunity to hear what Bayer is thinking about in this space, I think is really an interesting and exciting conversation to have. So I'm really glad to be here.
Great. One of the things that both of you have mentioned is the need for technology in solving our food problems sustainably. And I think that is a pretty big order because practices, whatever farmers do, and how when a new innovation or new technology comes, how is it adopted, or how does it actually translate and get out there? But I think we would like to tackle that in a minute. But before then, Phil, please tell us about all the work you've been doing. All these collaborations, third-party collaborations. I think you've also created new pipelines and new channels. I've been watching these competitions, so
Yeah.
tell us about that.
Yeah, so as I say, most of my time is really in that new space, right? And as you know, strong history of partnering, lots of great things to talk about there. But what I had been sort of aspiring to do is to think about where were we not gaining traction? Where were there new opportunities for us? And so we think about that through a couple of different lenses. One of which, though the major one, is really our open innovation programming. And so what we've been doing there the last couple of years is sort of experimenting with flipping the model. Instead of sort of sitting down and saying, okay, what are our gaps and needs? What are our sort of opportunities, and going out and looking for technologies to plug them? We've sort of taken a different approach where we're proposing, as you say, sort of competition based. So it's a little bit like a challenge, putting a challenge out there and saying, who's got a technology that could support X or Y? And those can be very broad, or they can be quite focused in scope. And we've had a tremendous amount of fun doing that, because not only does it help us, well, it helps us help the innovator, because we can design programs and create opportunities for them that are a bit more customized and more sort of boutique than just off the shelf. Yes, let's do a partnership. But also it helps us think about what's out there in a new way, because we can't know everything, we can't see everything. And so our Grants for Ag is our biggest program, and we ran that as a sort of combined program for the first time in 2020. So bear in mind, we did this in the height of the pandemic, right? We put this challenge out there, and we were looking for solutions, in the ag tech space that really were either thinking about new chemistries that were environmentally responsible, new traits that could support our pipeline, and digital tools, kind of thinking across the three things that Bayer's been really focused on. We had 640 something submissions to that program in 2020. And the way this works is that each awardee, and as you can imagine, we had quite a selection process to get down to, I think, the 24 that we funded. Each awardee gets $10,000 of unrestricted funding. So, there's no rights, there's no IP, there's no sort of rules in that sense. They don't have to submit a budget. You'd be amazed the university departments who can't get their heads around this. They're just like, what? We don't have to give you a budget. We don't have to give you a plan. It's good fun. But they get this $10,000 of unrestricted funding. But at the same time, we pair them up with a Bayer scientist. So they've got someone they can connect with, someone they can talk to about their project. We try to make it a subject matter expert that they can interact with as a peer and colleague, but also treat that group as a cohort, and have them get together every few months and sort of share ideas and share conversation. And obviously, we've been really happy that 3 or 4 of that first round have now led to larger, more structured and larger financed sort of deals and partnerships. But really, our goal in doing it was really about accelerating their science, right? And accelerating the opportunities, because everyone who sort of won or was awarded in that first round, they had either an idea or some data, and let's say a model system, or sort of a back of the envelope, here's what I could do. And they had a very specific, if I could only just take this next step, we might be onto something, right? And so the goal was to build a program around the first translational jump, if you will. I've done something at a small scale, I need to scale it, or I need a larger data set, or I need a field trial, or increase my sequencing data, whatever the thing was. Our goal was to provide that in a way where if it was interesting and the outcome was exciting, then obviously our hope is that would lead to a larger partnership. But what I wanted to see happen was in cases where there was an outcome that maybe was of interest to the partner, and I should say 90-something% of these applicants and ultimate awardees were academics. There were a few startups in there, but it was primarily academics. My goal was that each of them walked away with something at the end of it, right? Maybe it wasn't a larger deal, but maybe they had a new data set that could go in a student's thesis, or the next grant application, or a public or a journal publication, whatever it might be. That we were sort of looking for the win-win throughout the process. So we had great fun. We did that in 20. We did it again in 21. The thing we sort of changed there was we put sustainability front and center in the conversation there, that it wasn't just about innovation, it wasn't just about productivity. And so partnered with our internal teams that are thinking about sustainability 24/7, and funded, I think, 21 projects that year. And then this year we took an entirely different direction, and changed the program, keeping the same open innovation, transparency, sort of early innovation modality. But instead of the funding, we were able to open up our high throughput biological screening cascades that are all in Europe within our small molecules research. So if scientists had, and of course this is chemists now, so I'm no chemist, so I know enough to sound like an idiot in this space, but they were, folks who actually had a compound or family of compounds that they could test. We've brought them in, have run them through our high throughput assays with the idea of sharing that data back with them. And again, if there's something exciting there, would love to talk about a larger partnership. But if there isn't, they can take that data, again, no IP, no restrictions, and use it as they see fit. So it's about using, some of the tools in our toolbox to sort of build some new relationships and change the game for some of our external partners.
No, that's great. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of this, what is it, the Yeti program that NASA does, or they open up everybody's computer to get the signals if somebody's trying to speak to us.
That's right.
You're opening up everybody's chemistry boxes to find the next new.
Right. But the key difference is we're doing it. The thing I like to think about is we're doing it on a relationship basis, not on a sort of legal contractual basis, right? I mean, there is risk. People could generate data through this program and run off to one of our competitors with it, right? That's totally within their rights to do. And it's my goal to make sure that the way we behave and the way we build it, keeps them as partners for the long haul.
Right.
Can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, this program, so it's called Grants for Agriculture.
Grants for Ag was the first one. Was the grant was the one with the funding. We called the second one with the high throughput testing. We call that Testing for Ag.
Oh, okay. Right. So you have each. Yeah. So just the whole concept really I loved the idea of, instead of looking internally, trying to understand what your own problems were, look out and see what kind of solutions were out there, and then see how Bayer could shift to support possible new solutions you hadn't thought of. And it makes me think of, we have a lot of discussions in academia here in California. We talk about the siloing of expertise, right? Mm-hmm. And how much more productive everybody can be when you have connections and those tag phrases like synergy and stuff. And but it's real, right? When you have more minds together, you get so much more done.
It blew me away the first time, to give you an example of that. The first time we got our grants for Ag, the 2020 program, so they kicked off in early 21. Mm-hmm. We got them all, and it's a global thing, right? There were 24 awardees in, I think, 12 different countries. And so the first time we got them together, we couldn't get them all together because the time zone obviously didn't work, right? So we had 3 calls one day. It was in January of last year. And the first one was at 8 o'clock in the morning, designed to catch kind of Europe and the East Coast US. Within 5 minutes of kicking that call off, I could have just left and nobody would have noticed, right? Because they actually started talking to each other.
Yeah.
And as they introduced themselves, they're like, oh, you're working on that? Well, I'm working on this. Why don't we talk about, and it's amazing. I mean, scientists, we all have that gene, right? You put it in that conversation and boom, that's when the magic happens. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So my question leading up
Yes.
from that is, so, I mean, it sounds like Bayer is really trying to sort of systematize communication in this way, like to make, and you know, and I'm curious what, maybe this is the intellectual IP. What's the secret sauce of systematizing this kind of thing? Is it the cohorts? Is it that it's intentional partnerships with the scientists at Bayer? Is it the monetary reward? Is it that you're sharing platforms like those assays you talked about? Like, what do you think it is that keeps that all together? And then the other thing that I observed while I was listening is that I think it must take a lot of energy to keep this program running. And I'm curious kind of the balance of resources that it takes, or is it something along those lines? What I'm curious about.
Yeah, no, those are both great points. I think to your first question, to be honest with you, I think the secret sauce isn't in any one of those individual pieces that you mentioned. It's in stringing them together. Right. That's what I think is a little bit different about this. I mean, we can all do pre-competitive innovation. We can all fund things. We can all, create conversation. But I think the fact we're doing it in this sort of connected way, I think has made a little bit of a difference. And as sort of, and as 3 scientists talking to each other, it frustrates me a little bit because a lot of it ends up being marketing. Right, which is not what I went to school for, but somehow is kind of an important part of what I do now. But that's okay, because I think it's really just about helping. I mean, large companies, it's hard. They look like large companies, right? And they're very difficult. If you're on the outside of one, it's very difficult to look in and have any kind of clue what's going on, or who works. I mean, even Rajnish, even when you were working closely with us, right? I'm sure you still would look inside the big Monsanto and be like, I don't know what's going on in there. It's hard. And so creating things that are, but both transparent, but logical and straightforward, I think just makes it, my goal sort of embedded in all this is making it as easy as I can for the innovator. Meeting sort of my mantra in this space is really meeting the innovation where it is, not necessarily where we are, right? And sort of trying to get away from sort of I get asked all the time, it's like, what's your, what partner, what's your partnership model? How do you build partnerships? And it's like, well, it depends. It depends on what the need is. It depends on what the opportunity is, and we can sort of customize it. It's actually, from a resource perspective, it's not, maybe, I hate to think I'm overselling it. Maybe it's not quite as hard as it looks, because we've got a couple of great assets in this space. One is a very engaged both innovation sourcing team, which I sit in. So my peers and our immediate team that are really thinking about new technologies for the R&D pipeline, all the time. That's day in, day out. And so they're a great resource for me in terms of what general directions are we going in, where can we sort of point things like this. The other is we have a great ecosystem partner with a company called Halo that's based out of Chicago that really runs all the platform for all this. And so that was one of the things we tried to do up front, was find a partner there who could do all the sort of the mechanics, host the challenges, take the submissions, help us with the review process, manage a lot of that communication. So between, having a good number of stakeholders internally, and a sort of an outsourced operation, if you will, it's not that hard. But I will say it was a lot easier the second time. Let's put it that way.
Right. Right. So based on that, I have one comment and one question. So comment is first, I think for the first part, it's really important that you're a scientist yourself leading this, because I've come across other similar programs, and more frequently, they're led by people who have been trained in social outreach, or they're not really scientists, and they're placed there to create relationships. So I can see how that was thought through, and those positions were created. But I think creating these relationships, especially technical ones, requires scientific background, and that makes a big difference. And I think success of this program I'm sure, relies a lot in your ability to look at from both sides of the story, right? And yeah, and the question is that you mentioned this is a company, Halo, or an
Yeah.
organization?
No, it's
So
yeah.
so are they like contracted, or do they become part of the IP, or how does that
Yeah,
work?
so Halo. No, Halo is actually a startup themselves.
Okay.
As I say, based up in Chicago is where kind of the main hub of it is, and their goal is to sort of bridge those connections between innovators and opportunities to move them forward. And so they've got a handful, and they're across industry. It's not just an ag sort of play, but they've got all kinds of companies that you would recognize as customers, right? So essentially,
Okay.
they're a platform company in that sense, and have this well-defined and well-executed sort of tool for hosting challenges, receiving submissions. So, we're set up with them on a sort of an annual basis. We'll sort of decide what work we want to do together and
Right.
put that in place. But as I say, they've got other competitor companies of ours in the ag space, and then a handful of CPG and pharma and med tech type companies on their portfolio as well. So the cool thing about them, actually, them being a startup themselves, is when we first started working together, all these wacky ideas we would have. Can we try this? Can we turn the world upside down? Can we paint it pink? It didn't matter. They sort of embraced all the crazy as we tried to figure out the best way to move this kind of thing forward, and worked with us. They've been great partners the last few years.
No, that's great.
We can
And
definitely put a link in the show notes or whatever you
sure.
want to do to sort of connect out to them.
Yeah, we can. And if there is another call already available for 2023, or anything you would like to
There
provide
is
us, we can also.
there'll be new grants for ag and testing for ag calls are coming February 1
Okay.
of next
Yeah,
year. So
we can put information there for that too.
excellent.
So that's great. So now we've looked at two scenarios. One is where there was a need internally, and it was developed in a call, and then over 600 different ideas came through, and then you selected, let's say, 24, and then went through. Then the second phase, there was a need internally, but this time the work is being done internally as well, right? Only the sourcing of chemicals is coming from outside. So those are two very different types of relationships, and that were created. So I mean, it's great that there's a lot of creativity going on into thinking how these relationships are being built and what the outcome will be. And of course, and any of these things take some time to go through processes.
Yes.
Yeah. So Monsanto stays involved through that process.
Yeah. Yeah, what we try to do, especially through with grants for ag, it's a fairly well-defined sort of 12-month interaction, right? It's a small grant. We sort of assign a window of time, and obviously are more than happy to stay in touch and connected with folks as they sort of graduate out, right? So think of it in that sense. With testing for ag, yes, this being our first go around, we've spent a lot of time this year ironing out the kinks, figuring out the logistics, because folks would submit. We'd have to take a look and understand if what they were doing was in scope. We built and ran a quick sort of in silico screen to make sure that there were no red flags or any redundancy with the existing libraries internally and that sort of thing, to get it down to sort of a number of chemicals that we could test. And then there was a whole logistics exercise of shipping vials and shipping them back. And so that's all taken a little bit longer than we thought. But yeah, we've endeavored to maintain good communication through all that. As I say, we tried to set expectations as low as possible from a timeline perspective, because we knew we had a lot to figure out. But we've actually had some of the first data back now in the last few weeks, and pretty excited about what we're seeing. But now we'll sort of reach back out and start sharing that and figuring out where to go from here.
Yeah, great. Well, so the reason also we wanted to talk with you was to explore some other ideas, because, like you said, the planet needs lots of help in terms of getting food grown in a sustainable way. And so Dr. Krolikowski, or I can call her Katie, her students always call her Dr. Krolikowski, so I've gotten used to that as well. But so what we have been able to do in the past 10 years, maybe 7-10 years, is develop a network. I like the word open innovation, which happens a lot in academia already. People, but they're more focused, like Katie was saying. All these labs are a bit more focused. But what you've been able to do is do it in a grander scale, in a bigger scale. Now, this open innovation is great, but what has been missing, and I think that goes back to when we were all working together as well, is a better communication across academia and industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like you mentioned in the Grants for Ag program, you said majority of them were academic proposals. So you already started, bridging that gap quite a bit.
Yeah.
So what we were doing slightly differently, I started a company, i-Cultiver, and Cultiver, it was really for cultivating this relationship better. Because after my industry and academic experience, I saw that they were totally different silos, and it would be so much better if they were working together. So i-Cultiver takes industry projects and brings it to academia to solve those big problems. And we have, collaborations at Carnegie Institution for Science at UC Berkeley, also with USDA in Albany. We have our science collaborators. And so we have access to pretty much anything, sequencing, protein work, anything that needs to be done. We can do all of that. So while we were doing this, we got several industries who did not have access to R&D. So we started with the ones that wanted R&D. And because we're doing it through academia, we've been able to publish. So we've had publications, which otherwise wouldn't have happened. And funding came to the academic labs. And the industry got publications, and it's just been going really well. And as this was going, and like Katie was saying, she was starting this biotechnology program. So now we also have a year-round internship program. So most of the work is being done at community college. So that's been really great. We call this the BEST program, Biotechnology Education and Specialized Training. So these interns, they work in labs many times at on Stanford campus, at Carnegie, or at UC Berkeley, or at USDA. From community college, they get a chance to go and work directly with postdocs and PhD students and be on publications as well. So as this was going on, the only other part that was missing was a public kind of a role play. So in the past recent election, I was able to speak with the mayoral candidate then and now current mayor of Manteca, Gary Singh. And Manteca is a location central in close to the Bay Area. It's 1 hour from Sacramento, 1 hour from Central Valley, where all the farms are, and 1 hour from the Bay Area. And Manteca is very interested in bringing ag innovation, kind of a hub. And so I was thinking, what wonderful, it will be great to have something in collaboration with Bayer or anyone who might be interested, whoever is listening, to have a collaboration where we can have a hub where we bring in students who work on these projects and actually real world. So we are close to the Central Valley, and we already have some really cool technologies which can be analytical for farmers, for growers, to maintain sustainability for soil, different type of soil analysis, looking at chlorophyll. We also have remote sensing using satellite images. We have some really amazing things that we have put together that can be provided as services as well as an R&D and education and training in a private-public partnership at Manteca. So that's
so you really got, I mean, it's kind of amazing to me what exactly, to your point, Rajnish, is what can be done when it's actually just about bringing bits of a puzzle together, either in a unique way or in a way that's just not been sort of done before in a particular location.
right.
And
Right.
it's super cool to look, because if you look across the country, you know, there's a couple different tiers of this for me, right? There are some places where you look at from an AgTech, acknowledging my bias, right? From an AgTech perspective, you think about places like Sacramento, St. Louis has to be sort of in there, Raleigh, North Carolina, right? There's these sort of bigger epicenters, if you will, of activity that have got, you know, a great intersection of the different things you need to really rise them to the top and be visible pieces of innovation. And it's probably a whole different conversation to think about what the, you know, we think about Sacramento, St. Louis, and Raleigh, all exciting places, but very different, right, in
Right.
terms of their relative strengths and weaknesses. But super cool to me is kind of what sits almost, I don't want to say beneath, because that's the wrong way to say it, next to that,
No.
is
Right.
more, is the places where you're exactly right, opportunities where you've got the potential workforce, you've got the pharma customers, you've got innovation happening, and it's just needs to come together and rise up and sort of be visible and accessible. And you know, the problem I have is there's just so many of them, right? And so
Yes.
many different places that we could be paying attention to. I mean, we have a one of the programs we run through my team is our Life Hub network, right? So Bayer started opening these Life Hub centers, which are physical locations in various innovation hotspots around the world across the group, right? So this is both crop science, but also pharmaceuticals and consumer health. And they're amazing places because they're sort of locations where Bayer gets to stop being, you know, a 150-year-old German company, right? And they can embrace open innovation and transparency and you know, have less process and less structure and just think about innovation and think about how to move things forward. And we could open them up in so many places, it's unreal.
Right.
But obviously that's, you know, we have to be a little bit diligent about that. And so I'm always excited when you find these locations anywhere where sort of you're able to bring the workforce, which from an agriculture perspective is almost always the limiting factor, with the pull from the pharma customers and the push from the innovators. So it's super exciting to see, and would I'll have to come out and visit you out there sometime. That would be,
absolutely. No, absolutely.
kind of fun for me.
Yes, and in fact, you know, I think we spoke briefly before as well. It'll be great to have you give a talk at Carnegie Plant Biology.
No,
we'll arrange that. But you know, in addition to what you said, it's a pipeline from innovation to customers and all of that. But also, I think what I feel excited about is the closeness, proximity, and the connection with major universities. So like with Carnegie, UC Berkeley. And so the work, a lot of the work is actually happening in the labs because that's how i-Cultiver is based. Currently, i-Cultiver doesn't have a location. It's all the work is just
fully
happening
virtual.
in labs. Yeah, fully.
Yeah.
But the research is happening in all the labs and publications. And so I think if there was a place just for training, you know, like workforce development can happen and education can happen, and with direct connectivity to growers, because that also takes care of a lot of transparency. And by digital means, we also have a software that we've developed called TerreLocal, which is public facing. So there is a science, there's a science program, and then there's a public facing program where results can be shared with consumers who are consuming the food, so they can see what's going on behind the scenes as well. So all of these things have come together, and you know, it'll be great to continue this conversation, obviously, of this later on, if you're interested. but yeah, there is so much that I think is going on, and I'm so glad that Bayer is also looking towards outside
Absolutely.
for innovation.
Absolutely.
No,
Yep.
it's been great. So anything else you would like to add to
No,
the conversation?
I mean, I'm obviously grateful for the chance to catch up and the conversation, and glad that it's left you with the sort of message that we are looking out, right, and looking beyond our own boundary, because that is absolutely the intention. We can't. Agriculture is so dynamic, so complicated, and moving so quickly that anyone who comes in and says, "Yep, I can solve it all," is missing a trick or two. And so that's definitely a key focus of ours, is to keep looking outside. And that's why we do the types of things we do, because we can't turn over every rock. We can't be on the ground in every city, and agriculture is everywhere. And so we have to try to find ways to keep up with it.
Yeah, and Bayer is also everywhere, which is why it's important.
True.
An important player in agriculture. Katie, would you like to add something?
Yeah, no, it's so exciting to me to hear about the idea of kind of this behemoth company thinking about what it might take to be everywhere. I mean, I know that sounds almost impossible, but as Rajnish just said, and maybe you said too, agriculture is everywhere, and there are farmers that are huge conglomerates, and there are farmers that are small individual families, and everybody's working to feed the world. Right.
Yep.
And, the idea of taking that idea of innovation, like a good idea, moving it through research and development and thinking about scaling to make real change. Sometimes you think of that as like, oh, we're going to change it all with this one way. And it's such an interesting idea to think about, why couldn't there be places that are more locally focused in all different places where agriculture happens. And,
right.
Our California community college system has a very local mentality, and every college is different to meet the needs of its community. And it's really, it's just really exciting to think about such a big company kind of thinking that same way. And, that's how you make real change in the world, is to really meet people where they are. And
absolutely. And it always, it's one of the reasons I love coming out to California. I was there a month or so ago. I was there in the middle of November, and it's so fun coming out there from the Midwest, where when you're here and you're driving around in the summer and it's corn, soybeans, soybeans, right? Which is not diminishing. It's super important. But you drive around, your part of California, and every field has something different in it. Yeah. And it's a nice sort of reminder that agriculture is everywhere, but it's different everywhere. I mean, we haven't, when one of the sustainability commitments that we as a company made was to empower 100 million smallholder farmers around the world, right? And so when you really dig into that, you kind of think about what that actually means. It's amazing to me just how broad the opportunity is to have impact, because everywhere is slightly different, and we're all growing slightly different things in slightly different ways. And there is no silver bullet. There is no one technology that's going to change everything. And so which is, from a company's perspective, that's hard, because it gets very, very complicated very, very quickly.
And with that comes to specialty crops, like you were, I think you were alluding to in California. Right. And there are many products that are needed that maybe currently, even though Bayer is very big, but like the microbial products, and there's so many things going on currently. And I think there is a potential for a huge impact in the specialty crop market as well.
Agreed.
So, the first thing we need to do is bring you over here for a visit.
Absolutely. We'll have to figure that out.
We'll figure that out, and I will also arrange visits maybe to some farms or some growers in the Central Valley. We'll plan plan for 2 or 3 days.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have to.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Well, great. Well, so wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil. It was really great.
My pleasure.
Important conversation. And
likewise. Yeah.
We'll definitely be in touch. Thank you so much.
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Yeah. So everyone who's watching, thank you for listening. And you can find all the links that we discussed about the programs that Phil mentioned, including we'll put links to Hilo and the 2023 program that will be released in February 2023.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Things that motivate me are the beauty of our environment, the uniqueness of our planet, of course, but also the people I've met and the fact that people do want to play a stewardship role.
Welcome to TerreScience,
The podcast where reality matters.
I thought microtubules might be processing information at this basic level. Here we are, another 30 years later.
I can actually say it. I'm going to be a scientist.
Excellent, you will be.
What was fascinating is what emerged from that was also a transformation in their consciousness.
If I try to do that, we're going to go down that rabbit hole.
Because I wrote it for people like you to get a sense of field biology, for women to appreciate the challenges.
In that process of detection, that molecule momentarily is bound to us. It becomes part of us. So it's this incredibly intimate encounter that we have with the things of the world around us.
We are consistently asking what's wrong with the student rather than what's wrong with the educational system today.
Maybe somebody will be inspired to also go into this field someday too. That would be amazing.
Well, I hope so.
Welcome to the TerreScience podcast.
The podcast where reality matters.
My name is Rajnish. I'm a plant scientist at Carnegie Institution at Stanford University and an entrepreneur attempting to upgrade our food systems and our planetary footprint for the benefit of Earth and humanity.
And my name is Bridget. I'm a current graduate student and former vertical farmer, and I'm very passionate about public education and increasing access to healthy and nutritious foods. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube under TerreScience, or follow the links in the description below to learn more. We'll see you in the next one.